I'm not gonna lie, StarCraft 2 is an amazing game that I feel that everyone should try. However, when it becomes getting attached to the characters, that is a different situation. It hits harder due to the commander of this video, as he shows up in the Wings of Liberty campaign, shows up in Heart of the Swarm, and shows up in Legacy of the Void. What the fuck? Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to StarCraft 2 Co-op, a series where I record a few hours and condense it to ideally less than half an hour. Normally, I'd like every video to be 15 minutes or less, but beggars can't be choosers. Teaching you all the parts of the commander for the video, which includes the units, abilities, mechanics, while also going through the effects and changes of the mastery and prestige system for every commander. Now, before we go into the contents of the video, if you like the video or its format, in the description below, I have a video for all of the commanders on the screen and a playlist here. Like this video, each commander is covered in the exact same way, so if you're interested, here you go. The commander for this video is a very ability heavy commander, so for the sake of simplicity and the depth of impact of each ability, I will be talking about the most impactful upgrades that will make these units stand out beyond more than what they just look like. Zeratul, the Dark Prelate of the Protoss, and by the looks of him you can tell he's a Dark Templar, and you would be right. However, he doesn't exactly belong to that group anymore since he does live in exile, making him very lonely. Now, Zeratul by trade is a truth seeker, finding the answers to questions about the universe that each faction is quite literally too blind to seek due to the constant inner and outer conflict. And as you would imagine, the truth is unfortunately not liked by a lot and does not get the appreciation it deserves. He sounds more like a madman when speaking his truth, however, ugly truth and a very important truth that will take you throughout all of the campaign. Dare I say it, everything would be swallowed into darkness by Amon if Zeratul didn't do what he did. And every single part of that, unfortunately. Now, being on his own most of the time, Zeratul needs to get powers beyond the three main factions for help on his quest for answers. The Xel'Naga, the creators of the universe, Zeratul uses their designs and construct to create Protoss-themed army with a powerful Xel'Naga technology twist onto them, making them very special and oh so expensive. Now we move on to the more interesting section of the video, as it is Zeratul's most powerful component. Sure, his abilities and units are extremely powerful, but his mechanics are really the unsung hero in this battle. Now, as I mentioned before, Zeratul's units are expensive and can even rival Nova's elite troops and cost just as much, if not more. This is eased a little bit by the fact that he gains access to ancient assimilators, Vespian gas harvesting buildings that are capable of harvesting gas on their own and for free on every base construction. The definition of buy one, get two free deal, if you ask me. However, his overall mechanics that makes him overpowered is his artifact system. Zeratul uses long-lost pieces of the past to drastically upgrade his troops, and abilities are unlocked through this system. Zeratul is capable of revealing a location around the map where the artifact is with vision, giving a clear location of where it is on the map, helped by the fact that he starts out with the entire map already explored but not revealed. This makes it easy for you to actually find the artifact and use the terrain to navigate rather than looking in the dark. A subtle change, but a very powerful change if you ask me. Activate the ability from Zeratul himself and he will reveal the artifact, pick it up, and drastic upgrades will be applied. The powerful part of when an artifact is collected is not only that it grants you a new ability out of the 11 available, but it also grants you a free upgrades for your units up to 3 tiers. 3 artifacts for 3 tiers, granting an effectiveness of the unit's shield, damage, and armor increase already for free upon every collection, plus the upgrades for each individual unit. The power of his units and overall kit is balanced out by the fact that the artifacts grant you free upgrades that cost no minerals and no gas to compensate the insane costs of units, especially with the only limiter between each artifact is a very long cooldown, but not anything out of the region of insane. The only limiter to this system is the fact that there is a short time between each artifact and when you can get them, and the fact that you can hold only 3 artifacts at max, and now mind you, this is without the prestige upgrades, which I'll go into at the end of the video. Now, since I've already mentioned it, Zeratul and his abilities, one of which was the one I spoke about, Zeratul himself sneaks onto the battlefield with his permanent cloaking, high damage, and artifact hunting power. Now, don't be fooled by his HP bar, as even though he does have a lot of health and a lot of shields, he has cloaking for a reason, as he can be put down extremely easy, a situation you never want to be in, trust me. Dealing 100 damage with each strike and doing it pretty quickly, if I do say so myself. Better used against ground targets, as his attack speed when dealing with air targets, even after the mastery upgrades, is so sparse that it can't really be counted on as much. Now, Zeratul has his own set of abilities that makes him extremely powerful in the battlefield, one of which for mobility is Blink, a fast charging ability that grants a short range teleport to get himself out of danger easily or to close the distance if detected. Starting out with only one charge and increasing his level to level 50, upgrade with Purity of Will, increasing the maximum charges of a 1 to 3 depending on how much artifacts you have already located. For the sake of damage dealing and dealing with threats of all types, whether it makes sense or not, is Shadow Cleave. Zeratul annihilates everyone and everything close by, spinning around, dealing 100 damage to all enemies within close range. The part that doesn't really make much sense about this ability is that he's capable of hitting flying units with it. Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me either. Best used for dealing with attack waves and infested maps. As you can already know, actions speak louder than words. For fast movement and transport around the map, Zeratul has his ship, the Void Seeker. His own personal starship that thankfully can't be shot down, almost instantly transporting him around the map and can be used anywhere on the map, vision or not. I would strongly recommend this ability for a fast retreat to defend a base or an expansion, or to quickly get an artifact or get out quickly. Now, the last of his ability is the Prophetic Vision. I quite literally just explained it. It's the process of hunting an artifact. He gets a vision, moves over there, activates the ability again, grabs the artifact. Massive upgrades, you already know that bit. Now, before we move into the abilities, I need to make a clear transition in the video here, as Zeratul requires to not only be aggressive in combat, but to be aggressive in artifact hunting, as upgrades are going to be key for keeping your troops alive. Quite literally saying that his troops are irreplaceable would be an accurate term. Now, the first set of abilities on the top bar is a choice between 3 different abilities of summoning units. Now, the first is the Telbus Legion. God-awful units, I recommend to never make them, as paying 800 minerals for really advanced cannon fodder is just not worth it in my opinion. Now, keep in mind that all of these Legion units can only be guided to certain points. They can't be moved exactly or individually. You just have to set a waypoint and they'll work their way through, whether it kills them or not. Telbus's Legion is only good in 2 instances, whether it's matching sheer numbers of Zerg or infested, or absolutely harassing and swarming large enemies. But overall, between the 2 other Legions, there are much better choices, as I would never recommend to make this one whatsoever. Zorion's Legion. In my opinion, my favorite one, and the most powerful one by far. A great choice for most of the time. Being air units means they won't waste their limited amount of time going around terrain when they can just fly over it. Great at dealing damage to large amounts of enemies due to their damage output and the fact that they are flying. Best used to crack through heavy attack waves or an even hybrid due to their increasing damage over time. And the last of the legions is Serdath's Legion, a squad of elite Dark Archons. Now, due to their large health pools, they are capable of dealing with enemy fortifications and their special ability to temporarily take control of units, mainly high value targets above small targets. However, the level 3 upgrades for the artifacts are capable of summoning a maelstrom that stuns large amounts of enemies in an area for a few seconds, making them excellent at tearing apart enemy bases. Overall, every legion is going to cost you 800 minerals no matter which one you choose. Overall, I would go with the Void Rays or the Archons, not the regular Zealots. Trust me, they are not really a good choice. I only made them for the sake of the video. With the starting ability already unlocking at the beginning of the game, you now move on to the Fragment 1 abilities. Now, each fragment is earned by collecting them by Zeratul. As you already know, each tier not only unlocks increased upgrades, but also gives you an ability slot to choose between 3 abilities for the first 2 and 2 for the last one. Keep in mind that the first ability is the only one that you need to pay, as summoning the legions is very much not free. 800 minerals off, I'm afraid. The Stasis Beam being the defective one of the trio. Firing a beam from the artifact hold at the base freezes all enemy troops in stasis for 15 seconds. Troops affected cannot move, attack, or be attacked during this duration. The defective part about this ability is that the beam's width is just laughable at best, and you're most likely only gonna hit 3 enemies if you're lucky, and you're gonna hit even more enemies that you didn't intend to hit 50 kilometers away. So again, this ability is strong, it's able to divide enemy forces, but is it a reliable ability, and is there better choices? Absolutely. Now, with Zeratul being more offensive rather than defensive, he requires something to burn the infested during the night while he slaughters during the day. The Tesseract Monolith. a defensive tower with a few abilities, and to everyone's shock actually doesn't do much damage. Its main use is that it hits multiple targets at once, stunning on every attack, making it easier for his cannons to absolutely rip them apart. A shared ability among all of his cannons and this defense is the Shade version. Projects an image of the turret into another space with a large amount of shield and absolutely no health, extending the range and quite literally extending where the turret is. And the last of the Fragment 1 abilities is the Void Suppression Crystal, my favorite by far. This is the most versatile and easy to use ability, covering a very large area, drastically hindering all troops and buildings inside, suppressing by a very huge decrease in the enemy's attack speed and movement speed by 70% for 30 seconds. Best used on enemy fortifications as well as structures are disabled. This means that no structure is able to detect like defenses, and bunkers won't be able to fire out either. Ripping apart large amounts of enemies and fortifications has never been easier. And now we move on to Fragment 2 abilities. Now, Fragment 2 abilities of the artifact is all about passive buffs, real strong upgrades for your army and overall kit. However, I recommend strongly picking this one very wisely, as it drastically affects some units but not all units, which is a good idea to keep in mind since once an artifact ability is chosen, it cannot be taken back. The first of the passive effects is Steadfast Reinforcements, reducing the cooldown of his first and last ability by 50%, which I recommend if you are rolling any type of army. It is universally going to be a good choice. For the defense, Zeratul has a surprising amount of defenses and upgrades for such job. The Tesseract Matrix, an ability that drastically powers up the cannons and monoliths in a very huge way, decreasing the cooldown of the shade projection of all turrets by 25% and increasing the total health by 100 to outrageously increase your defensive capabilities. And the last of the passives, an upgrade for mobility, however very short distance. The Void Blink, an upgrade for Zeratul and 2 of 3 of his basic units, reducing the cooldown by 50% on the blink ability that should only be used when having a mass army of units that have such ability. However, if you are rolling any unit that does not have the blink ability, obviously do not choose this one, as Zeratul has more than enough upgrades with Purity of Will. And finally, for the top bar abilities, Fragment 3 abilities. Now, there's only a choice of 2 in this category, and the abilities can only be accessed at level 2. Therefore, you do not start with them at the beginning of the game, however very easy to unlock. Now, each of these abilities are built for different purposes, and even though the cooldown is universally bad unless you take the Steadfast Reinforcements ability, and keep in mind that both avatars' HP pools are extremely high, so they are mainly built for tanking, and of course their individual purposes depending on which one you choose. First is the Avatar of Form, with the power of lightning to devastate light enemies in an area with his Psionic Gale ability, electrocuting all enemies inside a relatively short range. And for the bigger targets, you have the Psionic Blast, capable of dealing a whopping 500 damage to a single target at a 3-second charge up time, capable of summoning charged crystals which overwhelm big targets and even the numbers in an overwhelming fight. Best used on his own or with the team, as he has extreme amounts of damage and extreme amounts of HP. Just to clarify, the Avatar of Form can be used outside of the army, as its damage output is amazing and its ability to tank, as you already know. But the Avatar of Essence, the other choice, still having the tanking power, but serves a much better purpose compared to the Avatar of Form. The Avatar of Essence does so little damage that honestly you could remove the damage and it wouldn't really make much of a difference. Having the passive abilities for allies to grow a small circle that forms around your army. As the circle gets more complicated in its design, so does your army's increasing in fire rate, therefore making your army much more deadly. Its ability to obliterate Amon's forces with his de-evolution wave, blasting the ground and changing all enemy units down a tier, making all enemies drastically weaker and potentially not even a threat at all.
From the hybrids, slay them quickly!
And that is the exact reason why I choose the Avatar of Essence. I overall go for the loadout of Zorian's Legion for the most time on the battlefield and the high damage, Secondly, I go for the Void Suppression Crystal to create openings in enemy lines and capitalize on those moments. I go for the decreasing cooldown of both the Avatar and the Legion upgrade with the Steadfast Reinforcements, and as you already know, I go for personally the Avatar of Essence. Now I want all of your input on this, as leave in the comments below if you've ever played Zeratul or even just want to play Zeratul in general. What would you design your ability loadout to look like? And that would be very much appreciated. Not only because I want to know your guys' input, but also that is the most amount of socialization I get in a day. But I digress. So let's move on to a more positive thing, because nothing screams positivity like heavy firepower, which of course is Zeratul's units. Very powerful, but oh so expensive. Starting out with the most basic unit of Zeratul's kit is the Ambusher. Not the most durable of units, which in this case for most of Zeratul's units, but whatever. Ambushers are capable of dealing damage with very high damage bursts and mobility by the blink ability. This unit can be spammed in extremely large numbers, but not at 100% as they do require support. With upgrades like blinking when the shield is gone at Fragment 1 and at Fragment 2 leaving behind an after image of itself, shooting only once and only capable of doing 50% of the damage, but getting one final shot before they are gone. These guys are going to be the backbone of your army, as these guys are the earliest troops you are possibly able to produce as soon as you start the game. For the supporting role, and not so much on the damage side, is the Xel'Naga Shield Guard. Even more flimsy than the Ambusher, however costing considerably less. It has a beam that by all means can do damage, but is nowhere near impressive. With the main role of keeping allies alive, mainly due to their shield charging ability using their own energy to keep allies protected. With a Fragment 2 upgrade that increases their regeneration rate by 100%. Very important if you are trying to protect your investment in your army. Having even more use than a normal shield guard is the Reflection Shield at Fragment 3. Creating a decent sized aura that reflects 50% of the damage back at the enemies to once it came from. I find it best to only use these units in a very small portion, as once you get the Fragment 2 upgrade, you really don't need as much as you think you do. However, it is good to have a few extra just in case, and make sure they're clumped up not only for the sake of protection, but for providing all of their buffs. Not only Zeratul's last basic unit, but a unit that very much shares a lot of similarities with him. This of course is the Void Templar. A warrior that works almost completely the same as Zeratul, with permanent cloaking to protect his very low health pool, as when detected, he is basically screwed, to put lightly. Specialized with dealing damage to ground threats, they can absolutely wipe out bases and attack waves, as long as it's not air units. Now, assuming that you're not facing air targets, I would recommend these guys in almost every single instance, as their cloaking and their ability to absolutely shut down detection abilities is absolutely phenomenal. The most noticeable of all of their upgrades is Fragment 2 upgrade to damage all enemies in front of them when they are blinking between positions, and to regenerate their health upon taking fatal damage every 3 minutes. But these guys are hands down the most entertaining units to use, because they absolutely destroy an enemy's base without them even seeing it coming. But mainly to use the blink ability to quickly jump towards those turrets that are able to have detection and quickly shut them down to start what is basically going to be a mass killing. And now we move on to even more firepower. Don't get me wrong, the units I've already mentioned have a vast amount of firepower and an insane amount of utility that provides value to any team composition you make. Now, for the sake of tanking damage and doing just as much back is the Xel'Naga Enforcer. Now, the Xel'Naga Enforcer is basically just a version of the Immortal, which means this guy is capable of dealing just as much damage as he's able to take. Surprisingly, the damage output is not specialized against ground forces. Contradicting all forms of Protoss technology, it now specializes in air units, hands down being one of the best, if not the best, anti-air troops in the game. Dealing well over 100 damage per shot with extremely long range and drastic knockback bonuses, with upgrades that both drastically increase the shielding and damage potential. And as you can imagine, a single death of these in Zeratul's troops becomes a little bit of a problem. The second last of the units, and only built for certain purposes, is the Xel'Naga Arbigator. I think I'm saying it right. Please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, which is inevitably going to happen. Despite my normal nature of spam all units to make entire armies, instead I say no to that idea. Who knew that overkill would become such a big problem for these units, besides the fact that they can't hit air units? This unit projects an image of itself forward, becoming temporarily stopped, and the projection explodes after a small delay. best used for bunched up enemies like attack waves or better known infested maps, while upgrades reduce the fire rate of the Nova by 50%, also with an added bonus of creating small explosions that pierce through enemy attack waves for a certain amount of time, dealing a considerable amount of damage. The overall problem with these units is that the fire rate is limited to an ability, it has no anti-air, and considering the sheer amount of damage it does, it overkills all of its targets, and 10 units will fire on one unit that have already died, and they have to wait through that cooldown, making them extremely vulnerable. In the last of Zeratul's unit, a unit that absolutely has zero attacking power whatsoever, but solves all of Zeratul's movement problems that I'm ashamed I really didn't use earlier. The Void Array. Built surprisingly in groups of 2 and doesn't charge you for both. I know, it's quite shocking with the whole Protoss and Xel'Naga thing going on. Normally, they are just regular flying units that can't attack, can't defend, and have absolutely no health whatsoever. But when deployed, they become checkpoints for your units to transport between. I find it best if you have one deployed at your main base, one deployed at your expansion, and one with your army at all times, so it allows your army to quickly get out of combat, get into combat, and defend your base from attack waves. Just keep in mind that these things have, again, absolutely no defense or attacking value, which means they cannot defend themselves, and with their very low amount of health, they become easy targets that can be put down quite easily. So make sure that you have some sort of defenses put up for them. Now, before I get into the mastery and prestige systems of Zeratul, you have to know that your success in both in-game and in the fights is dependent on how aggressive you are at 1, gathering artifacts, and 2, expanding your economy to accommodate those expensive troops. Now, most existing guides on YouTube or on the internet will state that using the Elite Void Rays is the best way to break rocks in order to expand your base. I found it out to be a giant colossal lie, as not only you are able to get Zeratul for free, he does more than enough damage, and you can especially capitalize on these moments in between the time that you're able to get each artifact. Now we move on to the mastery perks and the mastery system overall. Hard-earned upgrades that slowly yet drastically increase the power of your commanders, and this level is shared collectively amongst all your commanders. Now, power set 1 is a choice between one or all. Zeratul's attack speed increased to a maximum of 45%. Not only allows Zeratul to be more aggressive, equips him better to deal with much larger targets and even sometimes small targets. However, combat unit attack speed up to a maximum of 50% is great if you focus on your army more than you do Zeratul. This is especially noticed in enforcers and ambushers. Power set 2 has a strong sense of spamming. Unfortunately, I have to go against my better nature and say that the artifact cooldown is a much better choice. Reducing up to a maximum of 1 minute to get your artifacts a lot sooner earlier gets you the artifacts, and the sooner you're able to access all the upgrades or a flat out armor, shield, or damage boost. However, reducing the cooldown of the Legion to a 30% max combined with the steadfast reinforcements of 50% to a grand total of 80% cooldown reduction. Great, just great. You know, unless you're willing to drop 800 minerals practically every other minute, but beyond that, it is a great choice. Now for power set 3, you're given a choice between cost or cooldown of your abilities. Having a reduced cost of your Legion summons by 30%, which off the top of my head is about 260 minerals or less. It's about that number. And I can really only recommend this one of rather you're using the ability often or you're combining it with the ability I just mentioned of the 80% reduced cooldown, as I said with the previous power. A much better choice would be for the Avatar cooldown, as they get a 2-minute cooldown reduction, practically carrying the team as they shoot the legs of all nearby enemies with the Avatar of Evolution, or absolutely annihilate all living things with the Avatar of Form. Now the last part of the video is the prestige perks, a system only for the committed, and once you hit level 15 you can reset your commander's level and gain access to an entire new way to play. Anak Sun is a prestige rank that gives added protection towards Zeratul's army, as the Void Seeker gives his army supercloak, which basically means they cannot be detected. The only problem with this prestige is that the Void Seeker can't transport Zeratul around the map, vastly slowing down the artifact collection rate. Knowledge Seeker is an artifact specialist, making an unlimited amount of artifacts found around the map, making all troops eventually become insanely strong as there is no limit to their upgrades. And as you would imagine, there is a very steep cost with this entire prestige, as maps that normally end really quickly, you will not see this effect take place, and combat units are going to be 25% more expensive, as if they already weren't a lot already. The last of the prestige perks is Herald of the Void, making Zeratul insanely powerful, yet massively hindering him as well, reducing the cooldown of Shadow Cleave by 5 seconds for every artifact. Sounds amazing, right? Wrong. It reduces the cooldown of the ability to almost nothing. The limit to this prestige perk is that it limits all the artifacts you can get to 2, creating a very large problem for your armies as they don't get access to level 3 upgrades and level 3 stat boosts, draining their power in almost every single possible way. And that is about it. Now I'd personally like to thank each and every one of you for making it to the end of the video and for the growth on the channel. I honestly thought I'd never get to this point, and with the amount of support and criticism I'm getting in my comment section, honestly is a dream come true. Hopefully as the video comes to a close, you now know how to use Zeratul in StarCraft 2 co-op. Whether it's the unsung hero of the mechanics, overkill in variety of the abilities, uncomfortable cost of the units, and the complex choices of the mastery and prestige. As usual, if you love the video, love the series, hell, even love me, be sure to scroll down below and hit that subscribe button to keep up to date with all of the content coming your way. With all this being said, this is Toxic Spill. I hope you all have a fantastic day, and remember, do stuff you love. Signing off.